arriving at this book, I want to get into the book and maybe the process of writing this book.
Yeah.
The name Woke, why
Yeah.
you chose that, and the directions that you went in there, which I mean, like, let me just get to the see if I can find the table of contents here. Tale of Two Trains, Who Done It. You know, I guess these aren't all explicit on what we're talking about here. You talk about, from having gone through it, you talk about the mystery of anesthesiology or anesthesia, and I'd
Mhm.
love to get into that. But from there, you're also talking about banking, which
Yeah.
is something we've talked about on this. You talk about September 11th as being a red pill moment for you. And I was living in Pennsylvania, I mean, maybe an hour or so from Shanksville, PA,
Mm.
all the way to ETs and military secrecy. I mean, all these topics that we get into, this covers a wide um, array of topics. I would really like to know, what was it in your backstory that led you to being like, I need to author this specific book?
Well, that's a really good question. And yes, forgive me for forgetting what that was. You asked me that before. It's really not possible for me to answer that question without telling you about the red pill moment. I don't know if we want to go there
Let's
because,
go there right away.
yeah. Well, there was a moment 4 years ago, less than 4 years ago, that changed my life completely. It is a true red pill, you know, moment. I don't like to use that word very often, but we all know what that means, right? It's like some experience that just, whew, like suddenly you see everything differently. And what it was, I credit my wife Jill, who you mentioned before. She's an amazing human being, and she was, just scrolling through videos on her phone, and she's like, "Ah, yeah, this never made sense to me." And I said, "What are you looking at?" And she showed me a 30-second clip, 30-second video. That's all it took. And this video, are you queuing it up, Gordo?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll cue it up here.
Anyway, but to explain what it is a clip of a building that I had never seen before fall like that. And I found out that it was about 7 seconds it fell. What was really shocking to me about this random building was that Jill told me that this happened on September 11th. On 9/11, this building fell, and I said, "You've got to be kidding me. Where was this building?" And the building was, as we all know now, it's World Trade Center 7, about, I don't know, a couple hundred yards, maybe less than that, from the North Tower in the World Trade Center complex. The building fell at 5:20 p.m. on September 11th, 2001. It was not hit by a plane. And that right away was stunning to me. But what was even more incredible was the manner in which this building fell. And of course, I'm sure your audience is, aware of the conversation around this building.
Mhm.
And I looked at that and I said, there's no way. I want to know what the official story says about this. Like, forget about the fact that I didn't know after 16 years. I was in Philadelphia at the time in 2001. And I was a resident in anesthesia at University of Pennsylvania, and we had all prepared for a huge number of trauma injuries that were going to be shipped from New York City to Philadelphia when their hospitals get overwhelmed. So I was on call. I was, chief resident at Penn at the time, and I kept everyone in the hospital because we just expected we were going to get nailed with, trauma. Broken bones, crush injuries, all of this stuff, even though we were, 90 miles away. Nobody showed up, which was great. But what's scary is that all the people, or most of the people in the building, died. They got crushed. Moreover, and by the building, I'm talking about the Twin Towers. Moreover, the first responders, when that thing was on fire, by that thing I'm talking about the North and South Tower, the Twin Towers, when they were on fire, they were rushing towards the building. They had no problems running into the building. Why? Because it was made of steel. And we're talking about fire here. There's no way, firefighters knew that the building was not going to collapse. Maybe they get stuck. They would have to find a way to get around the fires, and there's going to be smoke inhalation. But the idea that the building was going to come down, and by the building I mean any one of those buildings, come down in a matter of seconds, was beyond their conception. Of course, at the time, I was, training in anesthesiology. I didn't really think about, the idea. I was just happy that, but not happy. I was sad that, these people all died, but we didn't see any trauma that night. And it was only much later, in 2017, where Jill showed me this video, and I didn't know about the building. And it is, again, it's the manner in which the building fell that I said, this can't happen. Unless, not just unless, show me what the official explanation says. Did you want to interject here? I don't want to keep talking if you have something.
Well, no, you're doing a great job. I was actually just going to ask, so what is the official explanation? Because everyone, already there's people in the chats that are sounding off like they've been skeptical of the official story as well. But let's just go through, you corrected me. I, for some reason, thought, when we were talking beforehand, for some reason thought that the 9/11 Commission report did not mention Building 7 at all. I know exactly where I got that, and that was a film. So I'm appreciative that you actually corrected that in my mind, and this does show that a lot of the times, even people like myself, where I can rattle off what I know and then sometimes interject something I think I know, and it's incorrect. So I love that, actually, and I love being honest about that, because we're going to get into bias here in a bit. But when you talk about the 9/11 Commission report, you said it was actually in there. So I asked you, what was the official explanation of Building 7?
That's a really good question. So I want to be very precise, and good for you for admitting that you didn't have all the facts, but you're not exactly wrong either. What most people don't know is that there's the 9/11 Commission report, and then there are the supporting technical documents from the National Institute for Standards and Technology. This is a subset of the Department of Commerce. And what you have to understand, for those of us who are not scientists, is that the National Institute for Standards and Technology are a group of some of the best scientists in the world. From applied mathematicians. Are we still there? I'm frozen here.
Yes.
Good?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah.
Applied mathematicians, scientists, chemists, metallurgy experts. These people literally set the standards for science, what we know about how to do things correctly. So they were tasked with solving, or at least explaining, why the buildings came down the way they did. So there's the 9/11 Commission report that talks about, where did the terrorists come from, and where were they the night before, and all of these things. But the actual technical explanation comes from the Department of Commerce, the National Institute for Standards and Technology. Okay. What did they say about the building? Well, this is what's really fascinating. The first thing I want to say is that they did not have a explanation for almost 7 years. 7 years. We're talking about World Trade Center 7 alone. They came up with their explanation about the Twin Towers, and I can talk about this forever, but let's just go about World Trade Center 7. What they said was that the building came down because of a phenomenon known as thermal expansion. When things get hot, things expand, and this, in effect, made a beam dislodge from a column on one of the floors, floor 12. This is column 79 of 80 columns that run the length of the building. And because this got dislodged from the heat from a fire, the building did this.
Yeah, so did this, as in, for those who will just hear this, he's basically showed that the building came down at free fall speed. There was nothing really even trying to resist it. It's almost as if that one column 79, or that beam dislodging, completely eradicated all the structural integrity of the rest of the building as it came down at free fall speed.
That's right. Yeah, well said, Ben. This is exactly what I'm saying. Not only did it come down at free fall speed, perhaps even more damning is the fact that it came down symmetrically, right? We're talking about one of 80 columns failing, and the entire building behaves uniformly, right? And so, here's the thing, right? I'm just going to throw this out there. In our world today, people fall on different sides of the story about 9/11. I believe the official story. I believe that it's all BS, or I don't know. How many of these people do you think actually read the technical documents from the National Institute for Standards and Technology?
Less than 5%.
Yeah, less than 5%. You're right.
Okay,
I would say it's closer to zero, but
you're probably
it's a
right.
small number, right? Yet they claim to know. What do they know? No, they actually know what their trusted source is telling them about what it says. That's I think we're going to hit this point later on.
Yes.
Do you know, or are you believing? No, that's two different things. So in order to know, you must read the document. And they said that that's what happened. One of these columns fall. How are they going to prove it? And here's the very first thing is that if you talk to structural engineers or demolition experts, they'll say it was blown up. I mean, it was obviously blown up because of the way it fell. So what you should do if you're going to be legitimate scientists is check the dust for explosive residues. Very easy, right? That's what NIST does. They have, chemists there. And then if there's none there, then we must come up with another explanation. So this is where the first distortion is did you check for explosive residues? And Shyam Sundar, who is the lead investigator for the Building 7 collapse at NIST, said, no, we didn't check. And then he was asked, why didn't you check? And in the NIST documents, they say, well, there was no reason to check because nobody heard any explosions. So there's no reason to check. So right away, we should be like, but it fell just like, it was being blown up and you didn't check. Given the fact that they didn't check, and so we cannot rule it in, meaning we can't prove that it was because of the evidence of explosives, we are now stuck as how are you going to prove them wrong if the evidence was not sought? You follow me? Anything else you want to say here before I keep going, Ben? I can.
Well, no, I mean, this is a good logical train of thought, is that imagine we're trying to debate any topic. I'm trying to, just think of something. Imagine we're trying to debate a topic, and then when you try and rely on the evidence, much of it is missing. And when I say much of it, I mean the evidence that would clearly either say yes or no to a suspicion. So that's a really important aspect to bring up, is you're saying that would be and that is probably, what was the company you said that they do that?
NIST.
NIST, yeah.
So NIST, yeah.
So NIST, NIST. Okay. Do they do that probably looking for alternative explanations to other kinds of arson and building fires and things along those lines, correct? Like
absolutely. So they're tasked.
So that's their job.
That's their job. Their job is to set the standards for how things are built. And when things fail, their job is to figure out why on earth did it fail, and why did it fail like that? What is wrong with the way we built the building? That's what they're tasked to do. And anyway, like you said, we don't have the definitive evidence because it was not searched for. And so without definitive evidence that would prove that it was blown up, how can we, as open-minded, logical observers who see the building and say, it certainly seems like it was blown up, but you're saying that it wasn't. You're saying that it was thermal expansion on floor 12. So diving deeper, if you'll allow me to keep going.
Yeah, please.
how do they prove that their theory was correct? Well, because they didn't look for evidence, they had to demonstrate that their theory is correct. And so what they did was build a computer model, right? That's what you do. It's like, I'm not going to build another 47-story steel structure and prove that it goes down like that. We'll build a computer model. And that's what they did. And they said that, the model demonstrates exactly what was observed. And this is the hallmark. This is the foundation for science. Your theory has to match observed behavior. Did the model behave the way the building did? The answer is no, it did not. I mean, first of all, the great thing about computer models is that you can adjust the model to behave any way you want to. For example, they model each part of this building, each component of the building, a beam, a column, whatever it is, and you assign various tolerances to it. At what temperature does it fail? What are the forces that are acting upon it? And then you set the computer in motion and you see how your model behaves. Okay, that's the best we can do. It's pretty damn good compared to where we were 100 years ago, where perhaps we would have looked for evidence. I don't know. But anyway, so that's what they did. And their model does not behave in a way that is consistent with what was observed. So let me be very clear here. They have proven that their theory is wrong. That's what they've done. Because their model did not do what we observed, the only logical conclusion is your theory is wrong. I mean, that's the scientific perspective. Yet they were allowed to throw out this theory, which they could not confirm and prove wrong. And that is the official narrative, is it was thermal expansion. This went on, and for those of you who do not know, there were engineers around the world that were screaming for a retraction of that kind of argument, and they were not heard. I'm very, very lucky to be in touch with some of these great minds, Tony Zambati and Richard Gage. They're really my heroes because they're extremely look, just go after the science, people. Let's not get thrown by media and narratives. What does the science say? So their model, they proved that they were wrong, but that's not being recognized. So this is the kind of world we're living in. It doesn't matter, what the science says. What is the story you want to tell? And we just give it to whoever we want to, and that's the story that's being told. Now, here's what's interesting, Ben and Gordo. Years later, an independent study that came from the University of Alaska in Fairbanks re-examined the data around Building 7. And what's really interesting here is that this guy really was very reluctant. And for you listeners out there, I really recommend you watch the movie Seven, S-E-V-E-N, or the number 7. It's basically a documentary that tells you exactly what the University of Alaska, an independent research team, did. And here's what's really interesting. And sadly, I did not put this in my book. I wish I did. But cutting through the whole stuff, the whole thing, they made a computer model as well. Okay. And they put in NIST's theory that this one column got, unseated. And guess what? Their model did exactly what NIST's model did. It did not replicate the observed behavior. But this is what they did. This is what's really fascinating, is they took it one step further. It's a model. It's a computer model. You can make it do anything you want to, right? They said, what do we have to do with all of the columns and beams to make it look exactly like what we saw on camera? The whole thing
reverse engineer what we saw to see what some of the causes could be.
Yes. Do we need to have 2 columns go? Do we need to have 8 columns go? Do we need to have some, what can we do to make it look exactly like what we observed? The only way they could do that is that they had to synchronously blow the internal columns, have them fail instantaneously and completely, followed by the external columns in a synchronous way, right? With millisecond intervals in between, something like that. I'm not don't quote me on milliseconds, but very quick. That's the only way they could get the building to fall exactly in the way that we observed. There's no way a fire can do that. There's only one way that a building or the columns can fail like that. You have to have a timed explosive device be detonated across the floors, or whatever. I don't know how. I'm not a demolition expert, but that's how they have to fail. You cannot have a fire do that. So the evidence is like it's proven scientifically that that building blew up. Somebody blew that building up. Let's be very clear. There's no question at all that that building blew up. It blew up. I don't know, and here's where we get lost. And I know you want to say something, but we immediately jump to who did it then? Who did it? Who are the perpetrators? Who knows? We're just talking about science here. We're talking about physics. Right. It doesn't matter. The point is someone blew the building up.
And if people want to look into this, it's an extensive analysis they did.
Yes.
It's seriously an extensive analysis. I'm not an engineer, but you are, and people who have an engineering background, it really looks like this holds ground with, the standards of what you would require with something of this type of analysis. So if people really want to deep dive into this, I'll post this in the show notes after we wrap. But it is a severely extensive analysis, so it's just important. As Dr. Setty is saying here, this is this is stuff you can really follow the science on and see that it has serious forensic evidence to back up these things. And I think that's a big part of all of this is it's so quickly ridiculed because of who is this particular person delivering the message. And it's so important for people like yourself and people who have a background and expertise to speak to this truth, because it's a lot harder to ridicule somebody who has credibility and has a background in this. It's similar to a lot of the subjects I'm sure we'll talk about that are happening nowadays, whether it's in the world of virology or whatever. But, I think people automatically assume all experts agree on everything.
Make sure y'all head over to benjosephstewart.com, become a member. You'll have access to the growing library of deeper dives where I talk about all the stuff that I really can't talk about on YouTube. Make sure you get involved in the Discord chat. That's where a lot of the conversation is happening, talking about new theories, being able to interweave into the greater conversation that is how we awaken infinity. That's our highest potential. And I just want to remind you, you are the most powerful technology ever known to creation. Wield it like an artist with a conscience.